Hi, I'm Steve Addison for the Movements Podcast, the podcast for people who want to multiply disciples and churches everywhere. Today we're talking to Troy Cooper about how churches are mobilizing workers for movements locally and around the world.
One of the things that is been most exciting for me is just seeing how legacy churches are continuing to participate in equipping and mobilizing their people locally for movements. But now we're starting to see some of them equip and mobilize their people globally to send them overseas as full-time supported missionaries. Embedding them on catalytic teams in the heart of movements over in South Asia. And so it's exciting when we, I think I've mentioned before, we're praying and fasting for these churches of peace. I know that's not a term in the Bible, but just these God-prepared churches whose leadership is broken for lostness, and they have a God-sized vision, and they're actually wanting training. When we find those churches, we're discovering that they typically have 3 different areas of interest for training. One is disciple making. Hey, come and help us learn how to make disciples. We see the Great Commission. We want to make disciples, and usually they're using an evangelism tool or training that's not very reproducing, and it's disconnected from their discipleship materials, which usually costs money. So disciple making is one. Church planting is another. I mean, there's a growing desire among churches in North America to want to plant other churches. In fact, here in Florida, I think the Florida Baptist Convention, they are funding churches that are planting churches. They are devoting their church planting strategy to going through existing churches because they see those as being healthy. So they're wanting to plant churches. A lot of times I would say the majority of the church planting strategies that folks are using is shepherd driven versus, a pioneering model or an apostolic model that, just starting churches by reaching lost people. So church planting is the second area they're interested in. Well, the third area is they're wanting to mobilize missionaries from their church. Hey, we've got a vision to mobilize, 50 units over to India in the next 10 years. So what we believe our role then is, we want to pray for those churches and those leaders. We want to serve them through training and coaching, but we're going to go at their pace. So if they're saying, hey, come in and we want to do disciple make. All right. We're going to come in and we're going to train you in disciple making, because we believe that if they start obeying Jesus in the area of disciple making, it grows their vision for then church planning and missions mobilization. Because we see when you look at the scriptures in Acts, it's disciple making leads to church planning, which leads Acts 13 to missions mobilization. So we want to serve them at their pace. And then the last thing we want to do is learn from what God's doing from them and apply it to other people that we're serving.
And the entry point of contact with these churches typically is the 3 touches, which we've talked about before. 3 touches of training.
Yeah, when they reach out to us and we talk to them and they fit the criteria for us, we go right into the 3 touches with the weekly rollouts in between. Yeah.
Okay. So, and people can go back. We'll post a link to that 3-touch training. So what you're identifying is that's happening at those 3 levels. You're seeing churches get out into the community and make disciples amongst people who are far from God. You're helping them plant churches. And then thirdly, you're seeing that some of these churches that you're training are gearing up for missions, cross-cultural overseas missions mobilization.
That's right, which is most exciting. I mean, that's a part for, as far as us laboring here in North America, God's heart is for the nation. So we want to see movement here, but when we begin to see, just being open-handed and letting the Holy Spirit lead, he is beginning to take catalytic leaders from these teams and mobilize them over to finish the task globally. So we didn't originally set this up as a mobilization strategy, but I think the fact that we have a U.S. strategy or North American strategy, it's turning into we're mobilizing the right kind of people. For example, one couple that is serving, I can't mention their names, but they're serving over in South Asia, was mobilized out of a church in Texas. And they within 6 months have already seen 4th generation churches, and he is now a team leader within that organization. I was just recently with Steve Smith in Denver at the GACX conference, and we were talking about this over breakfast, and he articulates it as 4 stages for mobilization, that we would have home hubs here in the U.S. where you've got active catalytic teams, whether it's through mission organizations, like I know we're working with Adam Gaucho of Greater Europe Mission up in Chicago to try to help them establish an active catalytic team up in Chicago that they can mobilize out of, or it's through existing churches. It doesn't have to be a mission organization. It can be an existing church. But so you've got the home hub that's an active catalytic team that's pursuing movement right there, and then you've got the field hub. So let's say there's a missionary team overseas that's that's actively pursuing movement, but they're receiving these catalytic leaders from the North American home hubs, or it could be home hubs in other parts of the world too. But they're receiving the missionaries. They can plug them in on active teams, and then from there they can mobilize them towards a team that's pursuing an active UPG.
UPG,
unreached people group.
Okay.
And then from there, they can mobilize folks to go after the unengaged, unreached people groups, or the UPGs. And so really setting up a pipeline of leaders to go after finishing the task. I think the thing I've learned too, mentioned earlier, let's go at the pace of the leadership. A lot of them are not there yet. They're not there on the mission mobilization. They're not there yet even on the church planting. It's scary, but man, they're there on making disciples. And so what I've discovered is, man, if they start obeying Jesus at any one of those phases, he's going to enlarge their vision and then their practice. So that's why we go in. I'll just give you a couple examples. With the church in Tulsa that we've talked quite a bit about, with Cedar Ridge Christian Church and Brian King and Pastor Greg Pittman there. When they brought us in, we weren't talking about church planting or missions mobilization. We were talking about disciple making. They had a vision to see 1,000 new disciples made. So we went in and served that. But then as they began to obey Jesus locally, we discovered they also had a missions vision. They wanted to mobilize 50 units over to Asia over the next 10 years. But their plan was to sub that out to some other organizations. Well, then once they discovered, wow, we've got our people making disciples, and we're the ones that are training them now, could we mobilize our own missionaries? So we began to talk to them about, yeah, you can. Let's help you train your own people for mission mobilization. So now they are not only actively making disciples, but they're on a track through we help them set up a church planting residency program or missionary residency program within their church, where they're on track to mobilize 50 units over to India. And as a result of that, now it's brought up the church planting. Now they're open to begin planting churches. That's one example. Another example would be the family church example. They came in and said, hey, we want you to help us with the vision to start 100 churches in South Florida. Okay, let's come back and talk about disciple making, because how you make disciples will affect the type of churches that you're going to plant. And so as we began to go, they already had the 3 circles tool, but we helped them with, thinking through a 4 fields process and commands of Christ. So, discipleship tools. So, and they already had a church planter residency, but now this 4 fields process with some reproducing tools is plugged into, not only are they training all all the believers in their church to make disciples and have seen some radical fruit, but it's impacting and affecting their church planter residency to where now they are planting what they call seed churches, which have 0 budget, 0 building, bivocational leadership, And they're actually, believe it or not, Steve, this is going to blow your mind. They are starting churches by reaching lost people with the gospel. And what's even more exciting is, 2.5 years ago, they didn't have a missions department. Now they've got a pastor over missions, and they're actively pursuing unreached people groups. So, they had the heart for church planting, but man, they went back to disciple making. It changed how they planted churches. Now they're going after unreached people groups because that's God's heart, isn't it?
And yes, it is. And they're being energized, not by your infectious personality, or not just by your. They're being energized because they're seeing God at work. Because I've often felt that one of the reasons why the whole vision thing can be such a empty process to come up with a vision is people aren't engaged in a way where they see God actively engaged in changing lives. As that happens, they're beginning to broaden the vision rather than just you've got a program you're pushing them down the corridor for.
Yeah, for them, in their case, once they started to roll out the disciple-making training, their baptisms from the previous year tripled in 6 months. They had multiple streams of seventh-generation disciples. And I think they're up over 800 baptisms in the last 2.5 years now. In South, and 100% of them are people making disciples in the community. So the fruit sold them. It wasn't like, oh, that's a cool package process. It was they saw their people actively engaged. And I think it's just the beginning.
I think just for anyone listening who's got responsibility for a legacy church, that the first goal ought to be, can we see some fruit in the harvest of disciples? Can we see God's activity around us? That's going to unfreeze everybody for a greater vision. You don't have to start with the grand strategy. You can actually start with, well, let's go find someone far from God and share with them.
That's good.
Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
But then it leads on to a great commission vision.
That's right.
Now, you mentioned a little bit before the whole residency thing. What's that looking like? Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, we believe when we look at the scriptures and we see Ephesians 4, that God's given some to be apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, and teachers. And,
I think the fifth gift was bloggers and authors. Yeah.
That's a sixth one. Yeah. Bloggers and authors. Yeah. We call them the BAs.
Yeah.
Bloggers and authors. They're important. And it's an equipping gift. So, you're living that out. But, we would separate them out. We disagree with ourselves when we say this, but just kind of simplifies things. We've got your apes and your STs, your pioneers and your shepherd sustainers. And those are supposed to be equipping gifts. Well, what we've seen is that there are apes in every church. There are pioneers in every church, but a lot of them, they're not involved in ministry. Because the majority of leadership is shepherd leadership. And they have a tendency to be a little bit antagonistic with shepherds, and they're very driven towards new people, new places. They want to engage the lost. And the other thing I think is a lot of them, you don't know that they're who the apes are because they haven't been obeying Jesus in that way. They haven't been in the harvest. And so when we come in with these trainings, it actually activates the apes. And then you've got to know what to do with them because they can be very disruptive. One example, the organization I serve with, E3 Partners, one of the gals from HR department, she's like, man, you guys are bringing a ton of people on staff here going after movement. I want to see what you're doing. So she came to one of our trainings, and she and her husband, Evan, came to a 4-day training in South Florida, and we had planned to, and for our time, we go out and harvest. And they were like, it's not really our style. They were going to try to get out of it. They told me that later. But they went out in the harvest. And, Tony, a guy from the Canadian team, went out and modeled in the harvest for them first. So they saw it, modeled, and then Evan gave it a try. And it was like something in him changed. it was like a switch was turned on. And he began to, right there on the spot, go and share the gospel. It even got to a point where we were like, hey, it's time to go. He stops a guy on his bicycle and draws the 3 circles on his wife's, uses his wife's back as like a board. He draws the 3 circles. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, here we have a guy that was trying to avoid. Now he's stopping people on bicycles. We've just discovered an evangelist. And
in fact, he's just discovered.
That's right. He didn't know.
The amazing thing to me.
That's right.
He didn't know he was an evangelist until God pushed him, gave him a nudge.
That's right. He got the tools. He got it in the harvest, and it was like it activated him. So, and then I spoke to her a couple months ago, and so here we are. 8 months, 7 months after that, and he's still actively sharing the gospel. She said, when we go out on dates and different things, she's like, I got to add an hour to our time because he will not stop sharing the gospel with people. Well, imagine that guy going back to his small group. What's he going to do in that small group? Hey guys, we got to go out. We got to share the gospel, And then for the first week, they're like, that's cool. And the second week, okay. Third week, all right, you're killing me. Or this guy going to his pastor, Pat, we got to make disciples. We got to go out and harvest, So you need to know what to do with these people once they're activated. And we learned this from Ron Surgeon and the way they're rolling things out in Memphis is the goal is, train and find those people, gather them together in a catalytic team. We talked about that last time together in the previous episode. The importance of forming these teams. So then the question is, so that's kind of how we roll it out, training, you find these people, but then it's like, all right, what's next? I mean, do we just, we've got these teams that are there. You're like, where is this going when you've got, a legacy church? And so we learned from Antioch Church out in Waco, Jimmy Seibert. They have a church out in Los Angeles, Epicenter Church with John and Evelyn Lowe. And this church network has just done an amazing job of implementing T4T principles. And but one of the things they do really well is they train and mobilize missionaries out of these churches. It's like every single church, their vision is to mobilize a certain percentage of people out of their church to the mission field. And so I got to spend some time with John and Evelyn last spring. I was there with Maya to cast vision for 120 pastors in Los Angeles area to set up a training that the Austin guys were going to go out and lead. And but I learned from John and Evelyn about this residency program that they had where they're training and mobilizing their own people for global missions. And so we just, brought John in. We wanted to learn from him. And he began to share essentially, if you've got a vision and you've got a simple plan or process, he's like, you just need to do it. Don't try to start it off perfect. You can work through all the details. He said, you just need to do it. And one of the guys on the call is a guy named Justin White, he's the strategy leader for Raleigh. He's the NoPlaceLeft guy that's there in Raleigh. And so Justin, he really believed that was something God wanted him to do. So he began to pioneer it through his local church there. And he's closely connected with Dr. George Robinson, who is definitely a movement guy there at Southeastern. And he and I, Justin and I we hammered it out over Denny's one time, like 4 a.m. about what would this look like. And what we came up with was not rocket science. It was really simple. It's like, well, what are we already doing?
Yeah.
Let's not change this. What are we doing? And then just, call it a residency. So the what we do, it's what we're already doing. We're meeting weekly for Team Church. We're meeting weekly to go out in the harvest, and we're setting aside a weekly time for these people to train others because we need to see that they can train. So that's the weekly rhythm of the residency. We're asking for 7 hours, a 7-hour commitment each week, that they have a weekly 3/3 gathering. We're calling it where it's church. They're calling it Team Church or Timothy Church. But, hey, this is a church gathering, so that they're learning everything within the context of a 3/3 gathering that has the authority to be church. And we've added on to there a time of intense accountability. You've heard of A teams or or chat groups, I think Curtis Sargent calls them. So we're using questions to kind of press into their personal holiness and growth. So that's a 3-hour time each week. The second thing is they're supposed to gather weekly with some leaders that they are passing on whatever they've learned in the team church time. They're supposed to gather some people together to train those folks. And this is typically gathering some existing Christians together. We need to see that they can train people. And then, so they're just passing on. And then, so the people in the residency will go with them. So they'll assist and watch what they're doing as they're training others. And then the third section of time, a 2-hour time block in the harvest every week. So then they go out in the harvest together, they model, assist, and watch them out in the harvest so that they can begin to make their own disciples and form their own churches out in the harvest. So that's a weekly rhythm. Now, we're not saying, they obviously can train more than 2 hours a week. They can be in the harvest more than 2 hours a week, but these are bivocational people. So we're saying if you've got this time blocked out in your schedule every week that's protected, then we know that there's time and room for God to move through their obedience in those times. It's not going to be because time is not preventing them from obeying.
So 3 commitments. One is the team church, which involves training. The other is to be in the harvest, taking others into the harvest. The third thing is to be training and mobilizing others. So they make those minimum commitments. And I'd imagine when they're in the harvest, when they find a house of peace, then their time goes into, now, how do we make disciples here and mobilize them?
It's exactly right.
Time they back off searching for the house of peace because they've found one.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, and we still see that as harvest time. It's just now they're developing disciples and forming churches in the harvest.
Yeah.
And so that's what the weekly rhythm looks like. And that's what we're already asking these other bivocational teams to do, right? So we're not changing anything. And then the content.
And I'm guessing, that's 7 hours. If a committed lay person pulled out of their current responsibilities in a local church, they could come up with those 7 hours.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thought behind this was, okay, you've got Awanas. All right, you've got choir. And, oh, by the way, we've got a movement catalyzing ministry.
Yeah.
So the time commitment is not, now what we're seeing is that people are loving the time and they're wanting to make more time for it as they're engaging in it. As far as content goes, during what are they receiving in team church? They're starting off with your basic, L1 tool. We use the 411 training the first week, and then they go right into the commands of Christ. And then later on in the first semester, they're getting the Acts study, seeing the 5 parts and 4 fields in Acts, seeing the 5 parts and 4 fields in the Gospels. Their weekly reading assignment is it's scripture. So there's a high volume of scripture that they have to read during their weekly homework. Then we'll do an iron on iron coaching session later on in the first semester. Then we transition second semester into long-term discipleship and bringing some of the other modules in. The other thing that's really interesting in this, Steve, is Southeastern Seminary. Dr. George Robinson has helped set this up. Southeastern Seminary is offering for folks who complete this program. I'm sorry, I called it a program. Complete this residency.
Yeah.
They can get 36 credit hours towards a graduate degree. And they just have to obviously pay for the hours, and there's some extra reading and writing they have to do. It's a growing trend, which is exciting, that the local church is now starting to take ownership of training and mobilizing their own people for local and global movements. And so that's what we say the vision. The vision is to equip churches to equip and mobilize their people for local and global movements. Yeah. So we're able to send from these these home hubs or these legacy churches, we're able to mobilize them over into an active movement to serve on a team. And so they can continue to grow and learn and develop as a leader in the heart of a movement. And then from there, be mobilized to any part of the world to begin going after movement. So that's how we're raising up teams. That's how we're raising up team leaders. So that's why it's, an important part of the residency is we want them to go over to India to learn from what's going on over there, to help with trainings over there. They'll see the training is almost identical, but it also gives, the guys over in India a chance to kind of, check these folks out and give us feedback on things that they need to develop in year 2. So there's an ongoing relationship with the leaders and the locations where we're mobilizing them to.
So just if we take the 30,000 foot view,
mm-hmm.
You've got these 3 touches of training over 6 to 9 months,
mm-hmm.
and that's repeated training in the context of local churches, helping them raise up teams of practitioners and trainers.
Mm-hmm.
As you do that and they see God at work in their local community, they start getting excited about world missions and about, hey, we can plant churches now.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're bringing some form and structure to how they can be growing leaders in a local context,
mm-hmm.
who know how to share the gospel, make disciples, plant churches. That's then springboarding into world missions or being released and sent out to plant churches around the US.
That's right.
And so you're putting in place the sort of stepping stones, the building blocks, really for what a disciple-making, church-planting movement should look like.
Mm. And
you're also very open to anyone watching and learning from what's happening, and they can go do this in their own way, put their own label on it. But what it's doing is preparing the way really for a whole new wave of gospel, discipleship, churches, world missions.
That's right.
Mm.
And that's just how this personally was not my plan.
No, you're not smart enough to come up with this.
No, of course not. Yeah, you know that. But I think as this has progressed, we're, again, that whole learning part, pray, serve, and learn. We're learning from these churches. And we're learning from the harvest, and this is just how it's progressed. Right now we've got 3 active residencies that launched this fall. A 4th one is coming on, and 2 of the 3 they did 3 touches of training, and this was the outcome. So these are churches that weren't even pursuing movements until this time last year. The Tulsa church went through 3 touches. They had a mid-level. And they had that vision to mobilize 50 units. And they've already, in August, they took a trip over to India and the elders, and they just were blown away by what God is doing there. They have 12 members that are part of the first residency launch, and a decent percentage of them are there because they want to be mobilized over to India. But you've got some others that want to do this locally. So I think it's healthy for both. And the other thing that's exciting is the residency is being run by a layperson, Mike Dennis. He's got he's a business owner. And so you've got a church member that's running the residency, providing leadership within the church. So the thing to hear in there too is it's not costing them anything. This is, it's an affordable way to, not that matters, but I just want to mention it. It's not costing tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's I would say, we're not charging anything, but it's going to cost you your life. That's the cost. The second
being
one
sent out from a church where others are being mobilized. They're going to see what God is doing, and they're going to want to support missionaries that have come from that sort of context.
That's right. So now imagine it, in the culture of the church, you've got kids growing up in the youth group.
Yeah.
And they're hearing about their own people that are going over and doing these things, that this family has been mobilized overseas. Well, now you've got a vision for the kids growing up in the church that we are that's normal for them. That's going to be the water they're swimming in. but they're a Great Commission church that makes disciples, start churches, and mobilizes missionaries. So the whole, pray, give, or go, that becomes a reality for these people, that it can happen within the context of that church, that they don't have to leave in order to do this, that they can all happen right there. And so our passion is, we want to train them so that they can do this themselves, and then we move on.
Thanks for listening today. If you'd like to learn more, then visit coopersonamission.com. This has been Steve Addison for the Movements Podcast.